Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today on Roll20.net. Follow the show, Savage Worlds GM, on Twitter at SWGM Podcast. Follow us on Facebook, SWGM Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube at SWGM Podcast, and subscribe on iTunes at SWGM Podcast. Branding is a wonderful, wonderful thing. If you have any suggestions for the show, any comments, as rude as they may be or as polite as they may be, we really don't care. We love feedback. Go ahead and mail those to savagedaddy@gmail.com. Tonight's topic, combat basics. Here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Hello.
Dave, the Rules Maven Scott.
Greetings and salutations.
And some call him Jib.
I died for cover! Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. So what we want to talk about tonight is, I know we give a lot of lip service to advanced tactics, advanced techniques. Hey, GMs, here's how you win a combat. Here's how you challenge your players. Here's how you beat the crap out of your GM, and some advanced, nice upper level, upper crust stuff. I think that with tonight's topic, we want to go kind of back to basic and talk about the basic combat rules and mechanics and how they apply in the game, and discuss some of the more overlooked parts of the rules that you may not be using. So one of the first things I want to talk about is going on hold. First of all, I want to say this. One of the things that you'll see in the Game Master chapter of Savage Worlds is recommended the countdown for when a player vapor locks on you. What action do you take? I'm gonna 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're on hold. What action do you take?
Yeah, first person to do that to me was Shane, sitting at a Deadlands table. I had just started playing Savage Worlds, and he kind of slapped the table and started counting. I was, oh shit, I'm on hold.
And what that does, and it can seem like, wow, that's kind of an aggressive dick move as a GM. Remember that the moniker of the game is fast, furious, fun. It's combat should not be this dirge that takes 4 hours for somebody to make a combat maneuver. Don't give your players time to sit there and collude for 20 minutes before somebody decides you're going to take an action. The second combat comes out, keep it moving. Keep it moving.
There's nothing that kills the whole Savage Worlds flow like one player in the midst of combat stopping to him and haw their options for 5 minutes, because the whole round should have taken 5 minutes or less.
Right. Okay. And before we get to emails about, well, you're not considering brand newbie players, and what about, of course, that should be just unspoken. If you have somebody who's never played Savage Worlds before, yeah, let's not rush the combat. Make some suggestions.
Even with the new player, just have that conversation with them in advance, so that when it comes to their turn, they can in plain language describe what they want their character to do, and leave it to you and the other players to interpret that plain language into maneuvers and things like that. Tell your new player not to worry about knowing what combat maneuver they want to use, but to instead come up with something really cool to describe their character doing.
Right.
And leave the mechanics to you, and you can still then put them on that clock.
I totally agree with that. You also have to have narratively established everyone's positioning so that they know, so that they can see in terms that are meaningful to them what's going on and what the situation is.
Yeah, depending on the style of game. If you're doing tabletop, it's a lot easier because you've got the minis out there and everybody can physically see where everything is. But if there's any question, if you're doing any kind of theater of the mind, even like that halfway where there's some representative things on the table, like dice taking up positions, but there's not a map and all the set dressing, then you absolutely want to make sure this is where you better be that GM that drizzles honey on every description and make sure that the entire scene oozes character.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so let's say that we're in the middle of combat has started. I'm dealing out initiative cards, and Chris gets a pretty high card, where he can go first, but he's a face character. He's not really built for combat per se, quote unquote. So Chris decides, I go on hold. I'm gonna see what everybody else does, and then I'm gonna figure something out. So Chris goes on hold, and as the evil dick GM that I am, I focus one of my strikes on Chris intentionally to shake him. Does anybody know why that's important? What happens to a character when they're on hold and shaken? Anybody know? Anyone?
Bueller? They fall off hold. They actually lose their action on hold once they become shaken. Great time, folks, to make sure you're spending that penny to soak the wound. Because if you soak the wound entirely, you're not shaken by the attack. You remain on hold. It never happened.
Yep. So if you're on hold and you get shaken, you're no longer on hold. You're shaken and you lose your turn. So you got to wait to be dealt back in to make that spirit roll to unshake and then take an action or be dealt a card. The other thing too, you don't have to declare an action if you're on hold. Once the card is held in the initiative, you're held. If we get to the end of that combat and Chris has found no good, reasonable action for his character to take, he just doesn't get a new card in the next turn order deal.
Just stay on hold until I want to go. Until I want to make that opposed agility roll.
Yep. Now, one of the things that you can do on hold, one of the advantages to going on hold is to interrupt another player character or NPC's action. And that's a simple opposed agility roll between who's interrupting and who they're interrupting.
Now, let me ask you this. When you have that player character who wants to go before another player character, do you make them roll those agilities, or do you just kind of say, okay, do you care if he interrupts? Because I normally just say, all right, if it's a player character, you guys make the decision. He can either go right before you or right after you. But
I go by the roll. I go by the roll personally.
I personally say, you want to interrupt Jared. You Jared declares his action, and you say, wait, I want to interrupt him because I've been on hold. I'll go, Jared, do you mind being interrupted?
Right.
And if Jared goes, yeah, sure, you can do it. If Jared says, no, I want to take my action, then there's a roll because you're actively trying to interrupt him the same way you would a NPC.
That makes sense.
Now, if you have again,
that's just me. That's the rules are. It's a roll.
Right.
I was going to ask, is that rules as written? That it's a roll, even if it's a player character?
Say it's a roll, but the rules make the assumption that there's disagreement.
Yeah. Well, the rules also assume that you're interrupting a non-player character.
Right, exactly.
And the rules are non-specific. Is the great thing. Just like pretty much every other rule in Savage Worlds, the rule is you make a roll to interrupt another character's action. It's not non-player character or player character. It's you make the roll to interrupt another character's action.
Yep.
Right. Now, that is where the rule is worded. I'm not disputing that for 1 second. I'm just saying that the wording of the rule makes the assumption that there is disagreement.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree there. This goes back to that conversation we had last week about the two guys when wanting to use a power to take control of the other one's Beastmaster. The only time that comes up is when two players at the table can't agree on something. And that's where, like everything else in the game, if there's when do we roll dice? When we disagree.
Disagree.
Right. I agree. Now, the important thing to remember is with this entire hold and interrupt, if you're dealt a Joker, you don't make any roll. You go whenever you want. You just automatically interrupt. There's no roll. No roll
and
whatsoever.
that's something that I've seen people get a little confused on. Is I've seen people go, well, you have the Joker, so does that mean I have to go first? Like, no, not necessarily. You don't have to go first. You just go.
You go when you want.
Right. You go when you want to go.
So I see we've got we have a thing from chat for Jib.
Yes, Alec Muzzi has decided to chime in as usual, and his question specifically, he calls out Jib for this one, and I have an answer for it after Jib. how would you incorporate a Fate style create advantage in Savage Worlds, i.e., knocking over bookshelves or spilling oil on the ground?
Right.
Oh, come on, please.
Well, here's the deal, okay? In Fate, creating an advantage has a very specific mechanical effect, okay? And one of the things I like about Fate is that no matter what you want to add to the narrative, it has precisely the same effect. In Savage Worlds, we have to decide what that effect is. And in this case, the effect of what you're describing is you're creating difficult terrain. Assuming you're not knocking it over onto somebody.
Okay, I can see that. I would argue the effect is it's a trick or it's a trick maneuver.
Yeah,
it's either an agility or smart trick.
Right, but it's creating a persistent effect, which the trick does not.
See, and where I would go in this is quite honestly, it would be a trick or test of wills, depending on how the player narrates what they're doing, along with a narrative effect. In this case, if I'm spilling oil on the ground, the idea is I'm not just making a oil slick in the middle of the room, but I'm throwing it at somebody's own feet. Therefore, it would be an agility trick with the narrative that there's now, this oily ground. And I would go so far as to say that's almost a hazard because, yes, it's difficult terrain, but you throw a candle on there and suddenly it's a flaming area on the map that becomes a hazard. So,
oh, damn. Shit just got interesting, son.
Again, This is where there's that whole flexibility of Savage Worlds to kind of interpret all these different pockets of rules and apply them as, kind of piecemeal. The guy who wants to just dump over a bookcase in the middle of the room, all he's done is created difficult terrain. The guy who wants to knock over the bookcase you're standing next to has created difficult terrain and done an agility trick against you. The guy who wants to, pour oil in the middle of the room, difficult terrain. Who's throwing it at you, agility trick and difficult terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's essentially the way I would approach it. You have to look for the meaning behind what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the GM, everything when the application of the rules should be what's the intent? What's the intended outcome? What's the intent?
Right.
Well, and I think an interesting aspect of this too is in Fate, it's and forgive me if I'm wrong, it's give or take like a +2 to pretty much anything you add.
Okay, creating an advantage does precisely one thing: +2 to a specific die roll. Depending on your success at creating the advantage determines how many free invocations of it you get.
And that can be taken on pretty much any die roll that comes up within the rest of that scene, if they can find a way to weave that advantage into their action.
Right.
Therefore, for Savage Worlds, I think this has the effect of, with the trick, the test of wills, that shaken status that can be the follow-on to, success really kind of takes the place of that, because it does give an absolute tail on that action so that it's not just creating some hazardous terrain. You could absolutely shake somebody, take away an action, take away a hold status, make them easier to damage, a lot of different things.
Right.
Even require an agility roll to pass through the oil slick, to pass through that area. Just as as you're running through, as you're moving through it, give me an agility roll. Right. To not land on your ass.
Oh, you could do the same thing for the bookshelf, because you've got that bookshelf, books everywhere. The shelves either still in one piece, or there's a bunch of pieces, and people are trying to get around that. So I think that's the easiest way to do this. Just combine the two. So
yeah.
There you go, Alec.
It works.
Boom.
So we've handled hold. The other thing that I don't think we really need to mention, but we probably should, if you're new to Savage Worlds, as a player or a GM, understanding initiative, not dice rolls. It's not an agility roll, dice roll. Whoever gets the highest goes in that order. Savage Worlds works off a standard deck of playing cards with both jokers left in. And all you do is shuffle that deck, deal it to everybody around the table, and you go in descending order from the top to the bottom. Aces to deuces.
And
yes,
if you
Jared.
wanna,
Yes, Jared. But which Joker goes first if they both come out? And what if two people have the same card?
you do not go first because of a Joker. You go when you want to.
No, I'm saying what if the black and the red Joker both come out to players at the same round, and what happens if two people have an 8? What do we do?
Okay, so we go by descending order of suit alphabetically. So if I draw an 8 of spades for Dave, Jib draws an 8 of clubs, and Chris draws an 8 of diamonds, reverse alphabetical order that suit. Who's going first?
I'm going last.
Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. Boy, have I said that a lot.
No, it's reversed alphabetical order.
Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs.
And I'm going last. Because fucking Jared gave me a goddamn club.
All right, but how about both Jokers? What do you got?
Jokers, B for black becomes before R for red in my book.
Yeah, and that's what I've always done.
Alphabetical order, so I would have gone the other way. But no, the interesting thing with the Joker, and you hear it all the time, is this idea that it's descending order Joker and then face value. And it's not. It's face value, and the Joker goes whenever the character wants. It's a free interrupt. There's no dice roll, nothing. The player says, I'm taking an action, the action happens then.
Yeah, you start at ace. You start the countdown at ace.
Right. Yep. Now, you also gain the benefit, if you happen to draw the Joker in combat, you get +2 to every roll. Every roll to soak wounds.
Oh, yeah. Soaking wounds, removing shaken, running. The running roll. You want to see your character suddenly haul ass across the room. Run on a Joker.
Mm-hmm. So everything you do, every roll you make, you add +2. Damage, attacks, soaking, castings, whatever. Does not matter. Add +2.
You want to have an interesting game? Slide a couple extra Jokers in your deck.
Oh, definitely. Stack them. If you want that to come out more often, put 2 extra Jokers in your deck. I do.
And remember to always reshuffle the deck anytime one has been dealt.
Right.
That way, those Jokers are always back in the pool. You never want to have that moment where the Joker's been dealt out and now the players have to wait for the deck to recycle. No, that Joker's come out. It's going right back in the deck. That's the way the rule is written because it keeps that game a little faster, a little more furious.
And that's why I always use 2 decks. I always have 2 decks of cards.
One for you, one for the players?
Well, no, 2 decks of cards. As soon as the Joker comes out, I look, whoever has the least amount of bennies, I hand them a benny. I say shuffle. I pick up the other deck, and I keep going. I don't have to stop and wait to shuffle. I have 2 decks, and I can keep things going. That FFF.
Nice. Okay, so
I
if you
have 2 decks of cards, and I hand the first one to the first player at the beginning of the game. Hand the second one to the second player. And when a Joker comes up, the first player gathers up the cards, hands them to the third player.
Yep.
Okay.
same thing.
I don't shuffle them and deal them.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, the idea the GM never touches the cards. It's always on the players to do that. And it's that extra Benny goes out occasionally to pay for players doing that. And it's another trick you can do to add to your Benny economy, but it can really give a player something tacitly in their hands to do when it's not their turn.
Right. Plus, they can never accuse you as a GM of stacking the deck, cheating their order. So if you're new to cards as an initiative system, be open to it because it seems like this is not the way we've ever done it. What's wrong with dice? That was just fine.
If you have the urge that you want to roll dice to do initiative in Savage Worlds rather than use the cards, stop playing Savage Worlds and go do something else, please.
Well, the thing is, and it seems just like, I don't know if I like it until there's the excitement at the table of somebody drawing a Joker and you go, woo! Or you're down to 1 wound left and the monster's right on top of you, and then you happen to pull a queen when they pull a jack. And it's like, oh, thank God.
That every round has a new initiative order really changes things up. And the other thing is, there is not a dice mechanic out there with any of the existing polyhedral dice that replicates what that deck of cards does.
Yeah, it just adds that random chaotic effect.
Yeah, it's a completely different randomizer. You're not dealing with a percentage chance that something's going to come up. You're dealing with a different kind of shuffle mechanic. The whole way around, that is a completely different mechanic. And then the addition of the Joker would be almost impossible to simulate with a dice mechanic.
Well, and also there's so many other mechanics in the game that rely on the action deck or the initiative deck, whatever you want to call it, because when you're doing a chase, you get a club as a player. You've had a complication in the social conflict. You get a club. There's some complication. So that deck of cards really plays into the entire system, not just initiative. It has other components in the game where if you say I'm not going to use a deck of cards, then you have to jerry rig a bunch of crap. And
you have to rewrite dramatic.
Why do that?
And so many other parts of the game.
Play the game as it's designed to be played, not as D&D, please.
Yeah, don't come to the game with a preconceived notion about what works or what doesn't, based on your experience with other games. Because Savage Worlds is completely different. But let's talk about the next. Let's kind of move into the
next. A quick question from chat. Carlin Kendrick's asking, isn't there an alternative rule in the core book to actually roll for initiative? I haven't seen it in the most recent version, and I honestly don't remember the older version well enough to talk about it. I do know there is a version on the forums.
I have done research in preparation for tonight's game. If you look in Deluxe, it says specifically design note. Previous versions of Savage Worlds offered alternate dice mechanics instead of cards. It's not included in this version because, well, let's face it, this is Savage Worlds. This is the way it's meant to be played.
Yeah.
It just says, suck it up, Buttercup.
It's a design note. It's not a rule. I'm going to take a pass on this one.
Right. So let's talk about the other part that's a really big part of combat when we get down to it. We talked about initiative order. We've talked about going on hold is something that a lot of players and GMs struggle with. Let's talk about movement. So every character, unless you have the lame hindrance or some other hindrance that keeps you from doing this, or you have edges that change things, the standard human pace is 6 inches. Everything in distance is measured on 6 inches on the tabletop. Now, and the Savage Worlds will tell you that equates to 6 feet, 2 yards. 6 inches, 1 inch is 6 feet.
Yeah, okay.
That's
1
inch.
1 inch.
Not what you tell your wife 6 inches
Yeah.
in.
I'm saying 1 inch is 6 feet. And I'm not applying male measurement to that. The 1 inch is 6 feet. On the in game terms. So, and it's put in there because Savage Worlds does this great job of just standardizing and saying, hey, listen, not everybody plays with minis. Some people play Theater of the Mind, or they're playing on a virtual tabletop that doesn't have a grid or a lock. We don't care. It's fine. If you want to play on the tabletop, we measure everything in inches, a literal inch with a string on the tabletop. If you're playing off the tabletop, every inch is 6 feet. So every human character has a pace of 6 inches, meaning as movement, you can just move 36 feet in a round. You don't have to worry about it. Oh, and in case we didn't mention it, in Savage Worlds, it specifically states 1 round of combat is 6 seconds in real world time. That's happening on the table. That's going to become important when we talk about healing.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So Jared, what happens if my character is got his dick in the dirt and needs to move?
Then he can crawl on his belly like the coward he is, but he's limited to moving 2 inches on his tummy on a crawl. On a crouch, you're crouching halfway down, you can move half your pace. If you want to run, you're subtracting 2 from that run die when you do it. Savage Worlds has a run die, ladies and gentlemen. The only die in the game that does not explode is this extra die that you can roll when you want to run. Oh, watch Dave. I can see the gears clearing. Wait, the only die that doesn't explode. Is that right? Is that right? See the hamster.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's right.
It might actually be, but it's making my brain hurt, which tells me I think maybe Jared might also be wrong. I'm not sure.
No, I
Jared's
actually that's the one, because I've seen that
It's-
question come up multiple times
Oh, yeah.
to Clint. Clint's like, no, it doesn't explode.
Yeah, it's one that a lot of people think explodes, but it doesn't. But I don't necessarily know that I could certify that Jared's 100% right that it's the only thing in Savage Worlds that doesn't explode.
Well, okay, this
You know of
research.
another thing in Savage Worlds that doesn't explode?
Chat would point out that no roll on a table would ever explode.
True.
That's
But
true.
we're not talking about a roll. We're talking about a die. The run die is the only die in Savage Worlds that does not explode. Okay, so with that said,
Tomato.
if you want to run, that is an action. So, and I mentioned this to bring it into vogue. Oh, the other thing too with movement, pace, your movement and pace. If you're going across rough terrain, then that could subtract from your pace as well, as for moving through rough terrain or dangerous situation. So we mentioned pace to mention this because we're mentioning movement. Movement, ladies and gentlemen, is a free action in combat. You do not have to worry about it. Moving is free.
Except where it isn't.
Well,
and that's just their monstrous abilities and powers and things like that that can affect that. But
Right.
yeah, by default, movement
Well,
is
and the best thing about it is you can. This is an example I always use for people: move, shoot, move. Because a lot of games you have to move, then take an action, or you have to take an action and then move. Where in Savage Worlds, this is one of the things that I loved about it when I first started playing was I could break up my movement. I could get a,
Yeah, that's the thing is it's not an action, therefore it doesn't take a physical place in a turn order. So you can break that up as much as you want. You could move, shoot, move, take a secondary action that's not shooting, and then move even further. If you want it, you're starting to talk multi-action penalty and things of that nature. That said, in any of those scenarios, if you're going to run, you can't wait until the end of your turn to declare it. You have to declare it early on because it is an action.
Right.
And it becomes a multi-action penalty for all those other things you've been doing.
That's the thing about initiative. You have to declare your chain of actions that you're doing up front. You can't amend it. You can't subtract from it. You can't add to it.
So, for example, I can't go
the math of of every roll you make.
Right. So, for example, I can't go. Wait, how far is the bad guy? Oh, he's 12 inches away. Okay, I've got a D6 and a 6 run, so I could possibly run up to him. Okay, well, I want to run up to him, and if I can reach him, attack him. No. You're gonna declare I'm going to run up to him and then attack him.
Right.
And guess what happens if you don't roll a 6 on your run die? Guess what doesn't happen? You don't reach him.
Right.
Well, I just want to point out you do take the multi-action penalty as soon as you declare that you're going to run up to him.
Well, that's true. So you're right
At
there. You're
which
stuck
point,
at a -2. You're not going to make
You're
it.
at -2 on that run die, so you better factor that in.
but
It's not a if, then, and, or. It's declare all your actions, go.
Now, one thing I do want to clarify that Jibs had said, he said you can't basically cancel an action. You absolutely can cancel the action. What you can't do is you can't cancel the penalty that the action created.
That's a fair statement.
You can absolutely declare, well, I didn't make it to the motherfucker because I rolled like shit, so I'm not going to take a swing at him, but I am still going to do a smart trick on the other guy, but I still face the full penalty on the smart trick as if I had taken the melee action.
If I had run and done the attack and done the smart trick, the whole thing still applies.
Yeah.
Right. So
and what I've seen out
quick.
there, let me throw this out there real quick. What I've seen out there, because you guys say, nothing sucks worse than getting a 1 on your run die. What I've seen a lot of people do who use the tabletop, and I've even heard some Savage Worlds people who are in the know say they even do this. They do a D4 plus 2. Because that way you're always guaranteed to get a 3. because
Okay,
getting a 1 on a run die sucks.
I could see that. I think the only problem I have with that is that 1 on the run die is again the voice of the dice. You know, the fates weren't with you, your foot slipped, whatever. The other thing I would point out is absolutely that the one thing to keep in mind whenever you're talking about, you know, moving actions like this, and unfortunately I got distracted by chat, freaking Ruben. Whenever you're talking about movement actions, the action absolutely gets calculated into everything else, but the penalties, regardless of how many you stack in there, don't actually affect the running die itself, but you have to calculate in, I can only get as far as that run die is going to allow. If you've got fleet-footed, that means I could get up to +8. If you don't, it means I can only get up to +6. So if it's 13 inches to the target or even 12 inches to the target, you might as well tell yourself there's a really good chance I'm not going to get there this round. So just factor that into that decision that the most you can get is that high value. You're not going to get further. Your penalties don't stack against it. Otherwise, as soon as you get added a third action, you don't have a run die anymore.
I'm gonna throw something out here, and this is gonna kind of we're talking upper level shit. I know we're talking about basics, but it's worth mentioning in this particular context of the conversation. Now, there is a jump maneuver in Savage Worlds that is an action. Well, it's not even an action. It's free movement. It's part of movement. I could, if I'm 2 inches short, I could still run up and make that jump at the end of my turn. And with a running on a strength roll, I get up to 2 inches off the ground going forward.
Only if.
Watch the rule. Go rules, baby.
Only if you declare it as part of the original action.
Right.
If you say I'm going to run up to him, and then you fall short on your run die, you don't get to add a jump.
Right, but you were saying if you're realizing and doing the math in your head and oh crap, I'm going to be an inch short, then you can declare I'm going to run up to him, jump, and pound him.
Right.
Yeah. But then and pound him is going to be at a -4.
That's true. Still, just saying. Because jump is something that's overlooked a lot in Savage Worlds because players don't tend to think 3-dimensionally about their role-playing game when they're in combat. They tend to think very 2-dimensionally. So remember, jump is something that you can do. There is a rule for it. It's a movement. I don't even think it's considered an action. Is it, Dave? Is it considered an action or a movement? I think it's part of the movement phase, right?
No one's ever used it, and I don't remember.
It in the book, it's under movement.
Yeah, it is. It's like going prone or anything else.
Right. So
to me, it's a movement. It's part of movement. If you want to declare, I'm going to run my full pace and jump, that to me is still one movement. It's all part of movement. But we digress because it's about combat basics. So
no, I do want to point out the furthest your character can ever jump is 2 inches.
Right.
I don't care how well you roll your strength check. You're not jumping across the Grand Canyon. We use that example all the time. Your character can only jump 12 feet. Period.
Maybe if you're using a superpowers companion, maybe. But so let's talk about. So we've talked about movement. Movement is important. Oh, go ahead. What's the question?
Carlin is asking, how would you adjudicate that when doing Theater of the Mind? Pick a number to roll higher than, and he's talking about using the running die in Theater of the Mind.
I would just calculate in my head the distance. Is it short, medium, far? And then tell the player, hey, here's how many inches, here's how many feet you are away. I mean, I really don't see a need to really break it down if we're talking Theater of the Mind. I have an idea of where everybody is. It's short, it's far, it's medium range, how many yards away they are.
Yeah. What I have a tendency to do is that I kind of just do the same thing. I kind of think to myself, all right, what's the overall where they at? So they're in a clearing. in a forest, and there's a bunch of cars around, because I'm thinking Rifts. I just ran this in Rifts. There's a bunch of cars around and ATVs and all this shit, and you've got them fighting all over the place. And one player character is on one side of the clearing, one player's on the other. Yeah, you can get to them, but you're going to have to run. So everything you do is going to be a -2. I don't even say roll. I say you're going to have to run if you want to get to them. Everything else is a -2. Or I just say, sure, you can get to them. You're close enough. This is an enclosed enough area. You don't even need to run. And I just kind of play it by ear. But that takes away from all of those edges and hindrances and things a little bit. So it's you got to kind of look at that too, as how does fleet-footed work if I'm not using a run die?
Right. So for me, I consider the situation in Theater of the Mind and just state you're 11 inches away.
Well, there's that, or there's the method I use, which I want to preface by saying has nothing to do with the rules. I know that whole rules statement thing. I'm going to draw back the curtain and show you just how much I throw the fucking rule book out of the window. So in my game, whenever I only run Theater of the Mind. Whenever you declare a run action, or whenever you declare any action in my game, I'm going to give you your range in short, medium, or long. Short is you can get there with a movement this round. Medium is you can get there with a successful run or 2 rounds of movement, and long is it's more than 2 rounds away from you. It might be 3, it might be 4. We can get clarity if you ask a probing question to me.
I like that.
What it is I then require, if you make a running roll, you need a success on that die.
A 4 or higher.
It doesn't matter if you've got fleet-footed. Fleet-footed just gives you a higher die type to make that roll with.
I really like that. That's a great way to do it. That's really, really straightforward.
Easy to explain.
Like I said, I throw the book out the window because for Theater of the Mind, that just works a little bit better for me.
Seems like it'd be faster.
That said, it won't work for everybody, so don't take this as me saying this is the way Savage Worlds is supposed to be played.
I mean, it works. I think either one of the way the suggestions been made work, as long as you're not you just want to make sure that, and we've said this before, that you're not hand waving a rule indiscriminately and then it having a cost to the player of like, well, wait a minute. I thought there was going to be a lot of running in this game. God damn it. That's why I took fleet-footed. That's why I have acrobat. That's why I have all these other things, is to cross major distances in a turn, and then you just don't care. You just automatically get there. Everybody just automatically gets there. This slow fuck standing next to me doesn't have to roll shit. He's with me. So, I mean, there's a certain logic to that and an agreement to that. So, running is an action. Now, here's the great thing about Savage Worlds. You want to take 20 actions in a turn? Go for it. You want to take 2? That's fine.
Jesus Christ.
You can take as many
-40.
Yeah, you can take as many actions as you would like. Go ahead. Now here's
dice rolls at -40.
So here's the key thing that messes a lot of GMs and a lot of players up that are new to Savage Worlds. We start talking about multi-action penalty. Every additional action beyond your first imposes a -2 penalty to all rolls, not to the next action. It doesn't stack. Like, it's not like you're -2 on the second thing you try, the -4 on the third thing you try, the -6 on the fourth thing you try. If you declare 4 actions, you're -6 on everything.
All of them.
And I think something else that has a tendency to kind of confuse people who are new, and maybe even sometimes people who've been playing for a while, is, and I don't know the best way, I know the book explains it, but you can't take the same action twice. Like, if I have a gun in one hand, I can't shoot.
Well,
with that gun.
It's clarified a little bit. You cannot take an attack action with the same weapon twice. It's not that you can't, like, if you said you can't use the same skill twice, that means I can't pull a second sidearm with my offhand and make 2 separate shooting rolls. That's not the way the rule reads. It's that you can't you can't take the same action with the same implement twice in the same round.
So,
that's
for
why
example,
that's why there's rules like rapid shot and frenzy.
Right. Well, and
those are specifically there to give you those.
Two-fisted ambidexterity is
so
to help
okay.
you
So,
with those penalties.
so for example, just as an example of that, I could at close range, as I'm 3 inches away as a character. I've got one bullet left in my revolver, and I decide, okay, I'm gonna shoot my revolver at the guy. And as I'm walking, I'm going to flip it around to where I'm holding and then pistol whip him. And then with my offhand, I'm going to punch him. And then I'm going to kick him square in the nards. Now, the first roll is a shooting roll. And now this is a fighting roll. This is a fighting roll. And kicking him is a fighting roll.
And I would tell you get to do 2 of those. 3, actually.
Why?
You get to shoot him. You get to hit him with the gun because you're taking you're using it as an improvised weapon.
Right.
You only get to use unarmed once. I don't care how many parts of your body you decide to declare. Unarmed is an unarmed attack. If you don't have two-fisted, and two-fisted even specifically calls that out, that you can't use multiple parts of your physical body.
All right. It's a fair cop. It's a fair cop. So just keep that in mind. Spell casting is an action. If it's an action, it's an action. Now, let me ask this. Can you draw a weapon while you're running?
Absolutely.
Is that
but drawing a weapon is an action? Yes. Because
Action.
drawing a weapon is an action unless
Now,
you
there
have
are
quick draw.
edges that make it not an action to do.
Right, quick draw.
Quick draw.
Yeah. And
or, for example,
to be
in
fair,
weapons, if you have a quick draw holster, it reduces the penalty.
and to be fair, I do want to point out, depending on the weapon, the GM can actually call for an agility roll even if you're making a draw action as an action. Because if it's a complex draw for some reason, if it's, you've got the Joker's gun, that thing takes some dexterity to pull out while also on the move.
or I'm pulling out my backup piece for my ankle,
Mm-hmm.
or calf holster or something. I'm trying to draw something from an inconvenient place while I'm running. Or what if I could just be crouched and try and draw a weapon? That would qualify, right? Because I'm in sort of a bent over position trying to run and I'm drawing a weapon.
Entirely the way that's worded is subjective for the GM on purpose, so that if you're trying to draw a knife while crouched, probably not going to make you give me an agility roll. If you're trying to draw a knife while crouched running, I'm probably going to ask you to give me a roll. If you're drawing a knife while crouched running through barbed wire, I'm going to ask you to give you a roll, and on failure, something bad happens.
Okay, and then let me ask you this. So what happens if I fail that agility roll, Dave?
I believe it's up to the GM, but it's the general idea is you don't get to take action with the weapon drawn. It's, you could rule that it's fumbled and left in the holster. You could rule that it's fumbled and dropped, but it's that's left more up to the GM. The rules don't very specifically state the outcome.
The rule specifically states, hold on. The rule specifically states if you fail the agility roll, you still draw the weapon. You just can't attack with it, that action.
Yeah. I'm not going to take the weapon away from them by leaving it jammed in the holster, unless maybe they critically fail.
Yeah, and that's more where you've got that leniency as a GM. Because I had a conversation with one of the fans of the show a few weeks back about critical failures, and they love the idea that every time that Snake Eyes comes up on the dice, that it adds something interesting to the game that wasn't expected by the GM or the player. I happen to come in on the other end of that spectrum, but
it could.
Well, see, and I'm of the opinion that it's my job to introduce chaos. So when you tell me I'm going to try to draw my knife while crouch running through the barbed wire, I am going to tell you as a GM, before you give me the agility roll to draw it properly, I need an agility roll for that complex action you're taking. And if you fail, this is the bad thing that's going to happen to you. Because that way the player's making an informed decision to go through with something that could lead to the Han steps on the twig moment.
Right. Well, and here's something else I want to talk about. We kind of skipped over this in multiple actions. The rules for multiple actions. The key thing to remember is one wild die. You only get one wild die for a multiple action.
Right.
So if you're firing a machine gun, you're only rolling one wild die. If you have the frenzy edge and you're taking two or the two-fisted, well, no, the two-fisted is a -2 separately. But the frenzy edge, if you're taking a multiple action for the game, it's one wild die. And the example that Savage Worlds gives is when a warrior with a frenzy edge, as an example, roll 2 fighting dice and 1 wild die.
Okay, but that's not taking 2 separate fighting attacks. That's the
multiple action.
It's the frenzy action that's triggering that. Now, Carlin brings up an interesting thing. He says that on the forums, Clint had qualified that a character with like 6 arms and 6 swords couldn't take 6 attacks. I hate to say this, Carlin, you're actually wrong on that one. The way Clint clarified it is that character gets an extra attack per extra limb. So a 6-armed warrior with 6 swords gets 5 attacks automatically. You're going to roll all 5 of those as normal attacks. They don't get a 6th because the second arm is there by default. That's not an extra limb. Now, they could absolutely do the offhand attack at that point with like two-fisted and whatnot. But that's where you start stacking in multi-action penalties for taking that secondary action.
Right.
But each extra limb actually comes with its own attack.
Right. So we're and here's the thing about Savage Worlds, as if you're new to it, do not read into it and try to go, oh, well, it's interpret. No. If it says 1 wild die per action, that's exactly what it means. 1 wild die per action. And then if you're not sure if we're talking about a multiple action or if this qualifies as an action, okay, we'll just see the rules on actions.
Yeah.
Savage Worlds is very modular and compartmentalized in its rule system. So don't read into it when you go, well, no. Exactly what it says. Exactly what it says. Okay. So we've covered movement. We've covered actions. We've covered free actions. Let's talk about the 2 styles of combat. You got your melee and your ranged. Let's cover ranged first because it's
so much better.
We got both styles of combat here, melee and range.
Now, when you see your opponent,
ranged is the premier type of attack, right? Because all you have to do
should be. It should be.
You want to throw that down, Christopher?
It should be. I
only need a 4. I mean,
I only need a 4 to hit you.
No, you don't, because my ass is going to be taking fucking cover.
I mean, if
at least a 6, probably an 8 if I can find decent cover, and I'm gonna hold my action until you shoot, and then my ass is moving. I'm staying in cover. You shoot, I move.
Hey, Jim, what happens?
And now
what happens when you charge up on somebody who's holding a rifle?
Inside 21 feet, with knife versus pistol. Inside 21 feet, I win with a knife.
Okay, but let's talk about in the game.
You can't use a rifle in melee.
Actually, you can use it as an improvised weapon.
Right.
You can't shoot me with a rifle.
No. You can only shoot with a hand weapon, and it goes against their parry at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, wait.
By the way, I just want to point out that applies to powers.
Hold on. Basic. Guys, let's keep it basic. Hold on a second. I know we're all very familiar. Basic. So, ranged attack is any attack that's not within melee range, meaning you're not standing like almost toe-to-toe or within an arm's swing of somebody.
Technically speaking, you can do it standing toe-to-toe with them. You just cannot be engaged in melee. Savage Worlds, you are only engaged in melee if one of you has taken a melee attack. You can walk up to point-blank range from somebody and unload your big long rifle on them. It's there. Now, the next round, they're going to swing at you. and that becomes so much of a club in your hand. But you can absolutely do it if you really want. I don't suggest it.
So to use our previous example of I'm going to run my full pace and do a jump to pound him. That's when the archer standing next to your character elbows him in the ribs and goes, "Hey, stupid. Watch this. I don't have to run. I don't have to do shit. He's within short range. He's not ducking for cover, that moron. He's not taking advantage of any cover at all. He's standing there waiting for a fist fight." So here's a great example of that in combat. The iconic Indiana Jones scene in the marketplace where he comes around the corner and you got the swordsman doing the ha 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 ha, and he just nonchalantly pulls a pistol out and blows him away and keeps going.
I just want to point out that scene is a failed smarts trick.
Yeah.
Or it failed intimidate. One of the two.
Yeah, failed intimidate.
But so here's the thing. Most ranged attacks in Savage Worlds do 2d6.
Give or take.
Well, for the most part. Okay. So and dice can explode. I don't think we need to talk about that as part of combat, being specific, but dice can explode. So what do you think your chances are better of doing damage without taking any and having a pretty good success of hitting a motherfucker? A 4 on a shooting roll, or that does 2d6 damage, or walking up to somebody with your d6 strength and trying to pound wisdom into them when you got to overcome their parry to even hit them, and then go against their toughness. I just rather pop people, pop, done. Guns and ranged weapons in Savage Worlds are deadly, crazy effective, and nobody ever uses them.
Okay. Guns should be effective. There's a reason why our military uses guns today instead of using swords. Okay? There's a reason for it. Actually, there are several reasons for it. But they should be more effective. That said, if I have tactical superiority, I can defeat you with a gun. I mean, you have a gun, I have a handheld weapon, I can defeat you. But not if I'm stupid.
The big thing really comes into also pay attention to your GM. If your GM's not doing any lighting penalties, his NPCs are never taking cover. His NPCs always just walk straight in waiting for a fist fight. Oh, absolutely. Spend your round backing away and opening fire. I remember it wasn't that long ago somebody had posted on the Facebook group about, he's got a group that the archer is constantly beating him. And I'm like, so have another archer. Throw some NPC archers into the mix, or an NPC mage. Like, respond in kind and show them that, or tree the archer, put the archer in a position where they can't take advantage of those things. And the GM had given a little pushback that didn't really match his world, and he ended up going in a different direction. But the point is, you can find ways to absolutely challenge that. It only requires a 4 to hit thing. It very quickly becomes a 6, an 8, a 10. And I'm not even talking like this isn't a random occurrence. This is a dark alley and he's standing behind a crate, -4 to hit. Right there. That's before he goes prone and moves it to a -6 to hit.
And it's a dark night.
Yeah,
so there's not a lot of visibility. There's ways to counter it to make it equitable and level.
Now,
quote unquote balanced. But
with that said, I mean the other interesting thing there is that restriction of you're only ever going to do basically 2d6 or 2d8 damage. If you roll up the character that's at a d10 strength and picks up a two-handed sword, you're going to do 2d10 when you connect. And it's not hard to beat someone's parry if you put some points in fighting and then declare a wild attack, have a buddy, distract them with an intimidate or a trick of some type. I mean, it's really, really easy to walk up and absolutely beat the shit out of somebody and have a higher range of damage you can do, but that higher range of damage comes at you have to walk up next to them and present your own backside to be beaten upon.
Well, and okay, so let's talk about melee. So anytime you're basically in fisticuffed or sword range, you're in melee. And here's Savage Worlds does this beautiful job of eloquently just saying, okay, and the 2-hit number in everything for Savage Worlds is a 4. That's the target number for success in everything in Savage Worlds, except when we get to combat, especially when we get to melee combat.
Right.
Now you must overcome that person's parry, which is their ability to anticipate, maneuver, and avoid an attack. And very simply, there's edges. We're not going to go that deep because this is basic, but your parry is half your fighting die type plus 2. Done. If you have no fighting whatsoever, you still have a +2 parry because you have the presence of mind to go, oh shit, I'm going to duck and bob move. Now, if I hit your parry, I get to roll damage. If I hit your parry and 4 more over it, I get to add a d6 to damage. And when I hit you with damage, it does the same kind of routine. Now it's against your toughness. Your toughness in Savage Worlds, armor aside, edges aside, ladies and gentlemen, is half your vigor die type plus 2. Done. So if you have a D10 vigor, you have a toughness of
math
7. Yep.
Now, just an interesting thing to point out. If 2d6 is your average damage range, your average is going to be 6.
Yep. You're going to average 6.
That means that base toughness of a 7, it requires a d10 vigor to be shot with a pistol and to survive the shot on average without damage.
Right. And then I think we'll just talk about wounds and shaken because, well, damn it, it's the most convoluted or confused aspect I think that exists in the game. It boggles everybody's mind the first time they hear it. What? So, if I do enough damage to exceed your toughness up to 3 points over, equal to your toughness or 3 points over, you are shaken. Shaken does not mean vapor locked. It does not mean stunned.
It means oh shit.
It means a number of different things. It can mean, oh, you got dirt, you got blood in your eye. The sun hit your eye. You just got your bell rung. It could mean any number of things. You're scared shitless, whatever. The point is, if you take your toughness or up to 3 points over your toughness, you are shaken. If that damage exceeds your toughness by 4 points, you have a wound and are shaken. So real simple way to figure this out. You roll damage, Dave. You rolled, I have my guy's got a toughness of 7, and you rolled damage. How much damage did you do to me when you made your damage roll?
10.
10. Okay, so I take 10 minus 7. That's 3. I'm shaken. Now, if Dave got the extra bonus attack and then ended up exploding on his die and rolled an additional 8, now I take 18 minus 7 equals 9. So I'm obviously got shaken and wounds. So I divide that by 2, and now I'm shaken with 2 wounds.
I think you mean 11, but it still comes out to shaken in 2 wounds.
What, did I do the maths wrong? Maths are hard.
Wait. We didn't say before we started the show that there was going to be math involved this evening. I'm out. I'm done.
And
I don't do the math.
The reason you divide by 4 is because every increment of 4 over your toughness equals a wound. So you just take the total damage minus your toughness, divide by 4.
Yep.
But Jared, what happens if I roll a 48?
Then I'm not going to do the math and embarrass myself on a 48 and 7 toughness. How many wounds would that be? 48 minus 7, 41.
Mhm.
Divided by 4. I'm going to round and say 10.
Yep.
And say you got
probably a good bet with 41.
Yep. And I'm going to say you're the new mayor of Woundsville. Welcome to Savage World. You got 10 wounds, motherfucker, for 1 attack. Now, here's the thing. Let's talk about this real quick. Soaking. You have bennies for a reason. Whenever you take damage, you drop a benny and go, I don't think so, not today. You pick up your vigor die and a wild die. You make a roll. Every 4 that you get on that roll eliminates one of those wounds you just took, wipes it out. Now, here's the thing. If you still have 4 wounds at the end of that, good night, nurse. You're down. You're done. You're down. You're incapacitated. You're out of it. You're out of the fight. You've exceeded 3 wounds. You can no longer stand or take any action or do anything. You are incapacitated. Now, what that means in the story may mean you're laying on the ground bleeding, going, or it may mean your ass is knocked the fuck out. Whatever it means in your game is what incapacitated means. Point blank is you ain't taking no actions.
No.
And we're going to roll on the incapacitation table to see if you have some permanent injuries and shit.
Or you die.
Point out, it says no actions. This does not mean your character still gets to take free actions. Those are still, despite being called a free action, they're still an action. You don't get to take those while incapacitated. So your character can't lay there and give tactical commands to the rest of the team.
Now, what I may allow the player to do as a GM, because I'm kind-hearted, is go, avenge me! I might allow that.
Yeah. If they want to give some color dialogue, absolutely. If they want to give pertinent story information to the narrative, they want to call out a warning and they want to give information, no. They are incapable of taking an action.
Right. Now, if you're running a Family Guy setting in Savage Worlds, the equivalent of this is you're incapacitated, you're sitting there going, ow, 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 for the rest of the combat. Ow. It could take no action.
No, that's when, if you want a Benny, that's when you're going to give me the Pee Wee Herman's death scene from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. So that's and it's germane. We should talk about soaking wounds and everything as part of combat basics. So understand this. So it's a Benny, and if you got 5 bennies, you can make that roll 5 times. As experienced players and GMs, we will tell you the wisdom of our years with Savage Worlds. Hold one of those bennies for that incapacitation roll, please.
Especially if you got 10 wounds. Yeah, I was gonna say if the number of wounds taken exceeds 4, you probably want to hold back maybe more than 1 benny.
And at that point, you're probably almost better off just to make the roll.
Yeah,
right.
I'm with Jared on this one. Depending on how many bennies I have, I'm gonna make a soak roll too.
I'm not saying don't make the
I want us to succeed on that goddamn incapacitation roll.
I'm not saying don't make the attempt, but I'd hold back 1, maybe even 2 for incapacitation, because it only takes 1 really bad dice roll on an incapacitation roll
to get you dead.
Right. Well, and here's the thing too: the effect of each wound that you don't soak means a -1 to all your actions until that wound is healed.
Including the incapacitation roll.
Including the nasty incapacitation roll. Now, once you're incapacitated, you never roll greater than a -3 on your vigor roll because you have 3 wounds. But guess what can happen when you roll a 4 as your highest die on the incapacitation table and you subtract 3 and you get 1? Good night, you're dead.
Yeah,
in the story,
bye-bye.
Dead. As in, I want him dead. As in, DED, dead.
And yet again, I have to correct Jared on the podcast. You can face a larger than -3 penalty on your incapacitation check due to fatigue.
Okay, well, granted, if you want to be nitpicky about it.
We were talking about wounds. We were talking wounds, damn it.
Jesus. Okay, yes. So you'll never face more. Hold on. Let me correct myself.
-5.
Never more than a -5, because you can have a -3 wounds and -2 levels of fatigue. Ergo, your vigor roll could suffer up to a -5, never greater. Now, and the thing is, with that incapacitation roll, you can survive, but now you got, I don't know, a dislocated shoulder. That is a temporary injury, give you the one arm hindrance until you get that shit taken care of. You could lose a limb.
Yeah, depending on the GM, the one arm hindrance could be everything from it was blown off to it was mangled. You've got the John, what is it? What was the politician's name? They always did the pin after the stroke.
Oh, Bob Dole?
Bob Dole. You can have the Bob Dole. You always carried a pin because the arm's just out there in that, that one position for the rest of your life. I mean, that absolutely could be the narrative effect of that one arm hindrance. It doesn't always have to be, well, chop it off at the shoulder, and
right.
You're not always going to be Lieutenant Dan with the stop at the knees.
Yeah, the one arm hindrance could also mean, hey, guess what happened? Your hand got completely blown off, or now you've only got like 3 fingers on that hand, and it's practically useless because you don't have a thumb, and you got like 2 fingers and it's mangled. You can't really much use it. So that covers wounds, damage, soaking, shaken. Let's talk about shaken real quick. Shaken is a narrative effect. Don't worry, Chris, I'm not going there.
All right.
Shaken, it's a narrative effect. And it can mean many things depending on how you're shaken and what the circumstances are in which you're shaken. You can be shaken from a physical attack where it doesn't do enough to cause a wound, but damn, that hurt. Took your breath away, like, oh shit. Ooh, and you're trying to catch your breath. Now, because we were just talking about wounds. If you get shaken, and before you get a chance on your next roll to unshake or drop a Benny to automatically unshake, which you can do at any time, by the way, you get shaken, and then here comes another punk and hits you again for shaken. Now you're shaken with a wound.
Now, I do want to put one addendum on you can drop a Benny at any time to unshake. You cannot wait until after the NPC has rolled a successful hit against you while you're shaken to drop a Benny and unshake in the middle of that shit.
You can't interrupt an action that's unresolved.
Yeah.
Right.
You could try to interrupt him. You could do it before he starts his attack, or you can do it after we resolve the damage, but not before. But not in the middle.
Not between, yeah.
Right.
You don't get the benefit of going, is this going to hurt? Then I'll spend a Benny. No.
Now, here's the other thing too about Savage Worlds. Damage is resolved as it is taken. Not wait till your next turn. Not give me a minute. Let me see what happens next. No. Right now.
And
I hit you for 3 wounds. Are you soaking?
Yeah, if you don't soak it, and then on your next, let's say you choose not to soak it. That first attack comes in, you don't soak it. I hit you and I do another attack, and I only do maybe 1 wound on that one. And you say, oh, well, I'll soak that. And you roll all the raises ever on the vigor check, you only soak the 1 wound. Mm-hmm. You don't get to retroactively soak previous wounds because you rolled really well now. No, those wounds are there until healed.
Right. So you must resolve damage as it happens. This includes shaken, because shaken is a damage effect. It can also be the effect of a mental attack or spell effect or whatever, but it falls into that category. So when you are shaken, you get a free spirit roll on your action every round
before your turn starts.
Right. To unshake. And that just means make a spirit roll, get a 4 or higher. You're no longer shaken. You can take any action you want. Shaken does not mean stop dead in your tracks, incapacitated. Shaken means you are limited to free actions only. You can still shout, ouch, that hurt, and run the fuck away. Well, not run.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dive for fucking cover.
Yeah, dive to the ground. Dive for cover. Shout, stop helping me. because it was your comrade who missed the shot to hit you and shook you. Whatever. What Dave and I have always said is the penultimate example of a non-damaging shaken intimidation type of situation is the scene from Jaws where Roy Schneider is flinging chum over the back of the boat, and Jaws just pops up like this, and it goes back down. And with a lit cigarette in his mouth, he drops the bucket, walks backward into the cabin with a lit cigarette hanging in his mouth, going, "We're going to need a bigger boat." He's not taking any action because he has just had it. He just had been shaken to his core, like, "Oh, we are so fucked." So that can be shaken. Now, if you're shaken from a physical attack, and then somebody else comes up behind you, and you haven't dropped that Benny the minute you got shaken to go, "Nope, not shaken," and somebody comes up behind you and whacks you from behind, and doesn't do enough damage to cause a wound, but they do enough to cause you to be shaken, you cannot be twice shaken. So now you're shaken and you have a wound. Worth mentioning, if when you soak that wound, you soak all the wounds, you're no longer shaken either. So
I think a lot of people can get confused on that. You must soak all the wounds. You take 3 and you only soak 2, you're still shaken. Because I had somebody just not too long ago do, "Well, I soaked 2 of the 3, so I'm not shaken, right?" No. Unfortunately, you're still shaken. I'll spend another Benny.
Shaken with a wound, yeah.
Yeah, then they throw another Benny at you. God damn it!
Now, I could be shaken by a, "Hey, look over there," and agility trick that you fail that shakes you and goes, "What?" Now, if you're shaken from that and I hit you and I do enough damage to cause shaken, guess what?
Wounded.
You're just shit. You're not wounded? Oh, no, it has to be. Oh, okay, wait.
You're about to shit the thing on your own.
Wait. You can only be... shaken can only progress. A second shaken can only progress you to a wound if it's from a damaging attack. Not somebody else calling your mother.
Not both of them. The second one.
Right.
The additional shaking has to be the one from damage.
So Dave does a taunt and goes, "Neener, neener, boo boo. Your mommy stink to poo poo." And you fail that, and now you're shaken. And then over here, somebody goes, "Hey, your shoe's untied." And you fail that, you're shaken, you look down. Guess what? You're still just shaken. You're not shaken with a wound.
And if you are shaken and take damage equal to your toughness, that secondary shaken's a wound. If you take damage equal to your toughness plus 4, it's still only 1 wound. The shaken status does not count as an X. That's not 2 wounds at that point. It's still only 1 wound. You have to get all the way up to the plus 8 to actually take 2 wounds from the same attack. And that's something that I see people get, wrong quite a bit. Actually, is that they want to they go, "Well, wait a minute, success equals a wound," but that's not really the way it works.
Okay, so let's talk about healing. I'm in the middle of a battle on a battlefield. I just got hit for 2 wounds. I'm in a bad way, and there happens to be a guy in our team that's carrying a medic bag, an EMT bag, and that guy is just genius. He's got like a D10 healing.
Too bad. It still takes 10 minutes to heal somebody.
Yep.
But he's got a D10 healing. He just walked right over to me and spent his action healing, buffing me back up, and woof.
No,
and I'm
no,
back.
He absolutely can do that to stabilize you when you're bleeding out. One of those results from that incapacitation roll we talked about earlier. He absolutely, with a single action and his healing bag, can stabilize you with a healing roll. He has to make a second roll to heal any of those wounds. And my suggestion is he should grab your lifeless body and drag you behind cover and heal you there, because he's going to be sitting there for the next, let's
10
think about
rounds.
this for a second. No.
Yes.
No. 10 rounds is 1 minute.
Sorry.
Right. 60 rounds.
60 rounds.
60 rounds.
So yeah, technically you don't really want to do that in combat. You want to wait till at the end.
Yeah. So what happens now? Wait a minute, Dave. If I don't heal, okay, so let's say you drag me off the battlefield. The battle has died down. The orcs are running back into the forest, and he does his healing bombs and all that, and fixes me up on his healing roll. And I had 3 wounds, and he heals 2 of them.
You get to take 2 of those and erase them off your character sheet, but that other one, it's gonna be a problem.
So next hour he can heal me with that other wound, right?
Nope. 1 healing attempt.
What if I go, you know what? The Hamlet's just 2 hours right over there. I'm gonna rough it out. Thanks. I'm good. Don't want no help. Don't need no help. Can I get those?
You're gonna be waiting a week.
I guess you just
a 2-hour ride. It might only be an hour and 1 minute.
But we have this thing called the golden hour.
But as soon as you're outside that first hour, you're waiting a week. And it's a natural healing roll based on things like, did you rest? Did you have medical care? The penalties on a natural healing
Can you roll your vigor?
The natural healing roll can stack up pretty quick with some nasty penalties if you decided, hey, with this wound, I'm going to keep fighting orcs for a week.
So I'm going to be in a -1 to everything I try to do for that full week, that full 5 days before I get my natural attempt to heal, right?
Yep,
so
you're going to be at a -1 on that natural healing attempt.
Oh, absolutely.
Carrying the wound penalty.
So
unless there's magic involved.
Unless there's magic involved, of course,
Magical
always.
Healing.
But so in Savage Worlds, there's this thing called the golden hour, meaning within the hour you took the wound, somebody may attempt to heal it. Attempt being the big word. And if you look at healing, that person has to roll their healing and subtract your wounds from that roll.
As their own.
If they have any. If they happen to be walking around with no medical bag and no supplies, there's another -2. Now, here's the thing. They get 1 bite at that golden apple. I don't get to roll, fail, and then try again a little later.
That is absolutely correct. So long as we're talking about the healing skill and like a general medical first aid type of attempt. As soon as the power is involved, the power still follows the golden hour, but they can spend as many power points during that hour as they want, trying over and over again to get rid of that stubborn wound.
Right.
Yep.
Now, somebody else can walk up behind you and go, hey, move over, Hoss. I got this. Because you were only able... Now, here's the other thing, too. Dave, what's the maximum number of wounds that you can heal on a patient if you get, 7 raises?
Dose.
So, wait, I can roll an 8 on my healing roll after all the penalties and heal 2 wounds. What if I roll a 12?
2.
You're still only healing 2 wounds. This goes back to what we had talked about earlier with the jump roll, where you only got 1 raise worth of additional distance. With healing, you only get 1 extra wound.
But I rolled a 48.
Too bad.
You did a really good job healing those 2 wounds.
There,
good on you.
Well,
those 2 wounds are supremely well healed.
Right.
I would even go so far as to say, unless you're just not caring about the game time-wise, you kind of got a bad GM, because as soon as you hit 8, I just had to stop rolling.
Yeah. Okay, so you're only able to heal 2. Does that mean Chris's character can come behind me and try to heal the 1?
Yeah.
Within the same golden hour?
Yeah, as long as it's in the golden hour.
But when he fails and goes through all of his bennies, that's it for him, right?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Just clarifying. It's nice to have it.
Well, and I think a ton of people miss that. A ton. I missed it for years.
Mm-hmm.
That you could only heal a max of 2 on any given attempt.
Yep.
I was just like, wow, because I was just like, oh, you just rolled 12. You got rid of all 3, yay! And then it was, I think Dave or somebody on this show way back. And I was like, I had to go get the books. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. I don't believe you. And there it was, 1 little sentence in healing.
Yep.
And it is yet again one of those rules in Savage Worlds. That's a 1 line, and it changes the way that works. And here's the thing that does, is that protects how special the healing power is. Mm-hmm. Because the healing power then has some additional benefits to its use. There's a reason to have those power points and to channel them into healing.
Right.
Because it's actually better than what you're going to get with the healing skill. And oh, by the way, the healing power doesn't require you lug around that medical bag.
Right. Well, and here's the thing that we hear this too from a lot of GMs, right? I can't challenge my players. They keep walking all over me. Are you using the healing rules? Are you applying the golden hour? Are you paying attention to time in the game? Or are you just going, oh, we meet next week and they have all their wounds back?
I want to challenge you.
Oh, you can't do that in this game.
You cannot have a meaningful campaign.
Oh, don't do it.
Time records
Oh,
are
no.
maintained.
So,
All right, Gary.
So I just want to I want to throw a challenge down. If you're a GM and you think you're following all the rules, you think you're applying all the penalties on ranged attacks, you're applying all the penalties on healing, you're following all the rules. That thing we keep saying week in and week out. I can't challenge my players. Use all the rules. If you really think you are, I challenge you to this. Initiate gritty damage. And I'm not talking about like the one that Jared loves. I'm talking about gritty damage out of the core rules setting rule, where every time they take a wound, they also take an injury. And the injury lasts until the wound is healed. Because now, not only is that player going to be suffering a -1 to everything they do, more than likely they lose a die type in something, or they lose a limb.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that gritty damage is no joke, guys. Gritty damage will absolutely cause every single wound to hurt.
Yep. And that's vanilla setting rule deluxe. Now, if you're not playing that kind of game, obviously, don't institute that. If you're playing a pulp game where you're usually get the shit beat out of them all the time and then show up in time for the next scene with, just the Captain Kirk blood trail, that's really the only impact, then obviously that doesn't fit. But
I was going to say, at that point, you shouldn't be complaining that your players are walking all over everything you're doing with them. It's kind of the point.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're supposed to.
Right? Now, here's the other thing I want to talk about, too. We talked about the lethality of the system. I want to talk about fatigue. And Dave brings up a good point because it's very often overlooked. So you can, and I know that the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, I'm going to do a shout out to this point, has this discussion often about how lethal is your system and the Stork scale of how many flights of stairs can you fall down without dying.
Depends.
Now, in Savage Worlds, you can say, give me an agility roll to avoid a level of fatigue from bumps and bruises and take no wounds from falling down 3 flights of stairs.
That
or
glorious scene from The Hobbit where Bilbo falls from the top of the goblin home down through all the tunnels and bounces off of 90 different boulders and then lands with the wind knocked out of him next to Gollum. That's a single agility roll to avoid a level of fatigue. Otherwise, I guarantee you, he's just a smushed hobbit.
Or, depending on how extreme it is, too, or the distance, maybe an agility roll to -2 to avoid a level of fatigue.
Actually, hobbits is bounce.
Now, could you also say, well, it's every 10 feet of a flight of stairs is 1d6 plus 1? Sure. I mean, it's falling damage. That's, that's fair. That's in the rules. But here's the reason why that I'm bringing up fatigue. It's sort of a more advanced kind of GM approach to dealing with damage because they can't soak it. They can't go away. They either have to pass the vigor roll or stick with a -1 for 24 to 48 hours.
The minimum that any fatigue in the game lasts, I believe, is 4 hours.
Right.
I want to say that the only effect of the game that can cause fatigue that's anywhere less than that is at 4. Everything else you're looking at 24, 48, or until whatever caused it is removed. In the case of some diseases can cause just perpetual fatigue.
Right. So look at the hazard section for more detailed applications of they almost drowned and they were resuscitated. Heat or cold, blah, 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 frostbite, thirst, hunger, sleep deprivation, blah, 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 blah. But in the course of actual like physical damage, you don't, if it's not from an attack, if it's from falling off a horse, falling downstairs, whatever, you can always apply, give me a vigor roll to avoid a level of fatigue as bumps and bruises. You're still suffering the -1 that you would get from a wound. You can't soak it, but it goes away in 24 to 48, typically. So it's a great way. Now, here's the other thing, too. On a fatigue track, I incapacitate you not after 3 wounds, after
on the third.
After 2 levels of fatigue. When you hit 3rd, good night, nurse. You're exhausted.
Now, depending on what causes the exhaustion, can change the effect. An interesting thing with fatigue, damage, the 4th wound is the 4th wound. It always goes in incapacitation. It doesn't matter what caused the damage. I don't care if you were set on fire, if you were drowned, if you were hit with a sword, if Jib lined up the perfect shot and nailed your character with a trebuchet. It doesn't matter. The 4th wound causes incapacitation. With fatigue, the source of the 3rd level of fatigue that actually causes exhaustion determines the effect of the exhaustion.
So, for example, give us an example.
So some are going to call for your character dies X number of minutes later in the case of, I believe, drowning. Drowning is very specific. When this causes that 3rd level of fatigue, you have X period of time and your character just expires.
Okay, how about sleep deprivation? I haven't slept well, and now I've got 2 levels of fatigue from not getting enough sleep, and I take the 3rd level of fatigue. What happens?
And unfortunately, like every other GM, I have forgotten most of the hazards.
I believe you have to be unconscious for 8 consecutive hours.
Yeah,
you're just unconscious for 8 consecutive hours.
You just can't stay awake any longer.
But that's the point: is these things can have effects ranging from basically a narrative effect all the way up to pretty much instant character death, right. Unescapable character death. Like, hey, Jared,
Hunger.
What happens if 2 characters pass out in a smoke-filled room?
They die of smoke inhalation. You could be in a crowded, smoke-filled room trying to get to the door. You know what? To move to the door, that's 40 yards away. I'm gonna say it'll take you 2 rounds to get there. Go ahead, give me a vigor roll. Oh, I failed it. Okay, you have a level of fatigue. Give me your 2nd vigor roll to reach the door through all the heavy smoke, and a -1. Oh, I failed it. Okay, give me your 3rd roll. You're almost to the door. Give me your 3rd roll to -2. I failed it. You're dead. Not you pass out and somebody revives you. No, you're dead. You have taken in so much smoke in your lungs that you cannot exchange oxygen. You're dead. End of story. That's all she wrote, period, at end of sentence.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
It is one of the deadlier parts of Savage Worlds, honestly.
Hunger is the same way, too. If you do not get food in a very specific amount of time on the exhaustion, you just die.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about combat, another thing, very tropey. Every single fantasy game out there includes the rogue who's walking around using poisons on all their weapons. Oh, buddy. Poisons are a nasty little thing in Savage Worlds. From, here's something that causes a little bit of extra damage to here is something that no matter what, if it touches you, you die.
Mm-hmm.
And your roll to save against this is to determine, do you die instantly or do you die in a few minutes? There is no I didn't die. If you get hit with that poison, good night, nurse.
Now, I'm also going to say in our discussion of basic combat, so we've talked about fatigue, we've talked about wounds, we've covered a lot of ground, and not to overload anybody, but we're going to go just a little bit further and talk about some overlooked opportunities that come with the game. So, I think probably the most overlooked thing is the players working together in concert. to achieve a victory. There are bonuses galore to be had in Savage Worlds when you work together as a team. The most obvious one being a thing called gang up bonus. For every adjacent ally next to you, you get +1 up to a total +4 against your enemy to hit. Not to damage, to hit. Oh, the other thing we should mention too. You don't get a wild die on damage. Sorry. Damage can explode. MA explode, but you do not get to roll a wild die on your damage roll.
So an interesting thing on the gang up. Remember earlier I talked about how you could walk up with your, assault rifle, step right next to them and unload at point blank range because you're not in melee. You haven't actually engaged in that. If you do that, your buddy can step up and get a gang up bonus from you, regardless of the fact that you're not actually in melee, because you are still adjacent to the target that they're attacking.
Yep. So
right.
gang
the
up
target's
bonus.
still having a split their
attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's gang up bonus. Work together in concert. Any agility or smart trick that is a success, not a raise, a success, grants a +2 to all actions against that target until that target's next action. Did I quote that right, Dave?
I
always mix up test of wills versus tricks.
No, we're talking about tricks.
That's not the question that I'm having. I'm trying to remember, is it the raise that gives the +2?
Raise causes shaken.
Or is the raise shaken? And I believe
raise
it is
causes
shaken.
So here's the thing. Dave can have no taunt skill, no nothing, and just do one of these. Booga, 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 booga. And say that's a smarts trick. And then he rolls his smarts. The target rolls their smarts. On a success,
it reduces the target's parry by 2.
Right. So until his next action, his parry is down by 2. That means everybody essentially in your party gets a +2 to attack him. Just because Dave went booga, 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 booga as an action. And now if Dave does the taunt or test of will, then that bonus belongs to Dave's character exclusively.
On my next action against that foe within the same combat. Now, an interesting thing that goes along with the whole trick test of wills thing is you also have a lot of maneuvers that you can take that are going to get you the same level of bonus. So like a wild attack or a double tap. Those stack with that. And they also stack with gang up. There's no cap. If you line up all the things, you can get a lot of bonuses by taking advantage of all of these things. And this goes back to, where Jim earlier was talking about how, with Fate, it's the really good roll determines how many times that particular advantage can be drawn from. It's Savage Worlds, there's no limit. The advantage, as long as it's in play, he's been tricked. Everyone gets that bonus until he takes it off of himself by taking action. But there's no cap on how many of these things you can apply. So you could double tap on the same character that's been ganged up and has been tricked, and that you have the drop on.
Mm-hmm.
And when your GM has his big bad evil guy, that's exactly what you want to do. That's precisely what you want to do.
And GM, if your big bad evil guys or even your parties of mercenaries are getting stomped on, guess what you're not doing? You're not taking advantage of things like, hey, surprise, or hey, gang up bonus, or hey, I've got someone tricking the best fighter in the player's group is constantly in a state. Here's what happens. If I could do just enough damage to keep your big bad fighter in your party shaken, I win. I'm going to win that confrontation if I can consistently keep the heavy hitters in that player group shaken, because they're gonna either burn through shit tons of biddies right there at the beginning to try to take actions, or they're gonna be in a shaken condition, then get shaken again, take a wound, and then now they're in a -1. The mercenaries should gang up. Your goblins should gang up on the fighter, surround him, pound him. The other thing you can do, push him to the ground. The simplest thing to do, a prone target gets a +2 bonus for cover to be hit from range. However, his parry goes down by 2 because he's on the ground trying to maneuver and keep you off of him.
You want just an interesting tactic that uses basic combat rules? In your next sci-fi game, buy a satchel of sticky bombs. And look at your GM and declare very calmly and collectively that you make a touch attack and touch your opponent with a sticky bomb. It's +2 to hit him. Because all you're doing is reaching out and touching him.
Mm-hmm. So that said, take advantage of wild attack. I'm going to throw my 3 favorite maneuvers out there for the players, and we'll kind of wrap up the show with your 3 favorite maneuvers. My 3 favorite maneuvers and tactics to take are push, grapple, and wild attack.
I would say I two of the same for me. So I like a grapple, and it's simple and easy to do. Wild attack, I try to do that and try to get my players. I also, if you have a gun that does a 3-round burst, do a 3-round burst, because it's 3 shooting die, 1 wild die. Just hope you don't roll a 1 if you're shooting into melee.
Yeah, that or the double tap where you get the bonus to hit and the bonus to damage.
Yep.
Double tap is essentially the equivalent of wild attack for a gun.
Jib, got a favorite?
My favorite is a taunt trip smash.
A taunt trick hit? Taunt trick smash?
Taunt trip smash.
I will
Trip.
say there's trip.
It's taunt trip smash.
Right.
I like to approach every combat with what would Chuck Norris do? And then follow that line.
Hey, I'm just going to throw this one out there. For all you that want to make the complete pacifist character that doesn't have fighting, full defense is an amazing thing.
Yep.
But even better than full defense is just the defend maneuver, because then you can move and still increase your parry by +2.
Right. And all these things are things that we talked about tonight that would be very useful advice in, I don't know, if there were a new pirate game on the market, maybe possibly coming out to Kickstarter. I don't know.
There might
Soon?
be. There might be. Yeah, there might be. I think it's going to be called Buccaneer Through Hell and High Water, which launched on Tuesday. If you guys have already gone and backed us, thank you so much. We're amazed at how well things are going. We are $96 away from funding.
Okay, and just as an interesting side comment, if you heard it on this show and you're in the last part of that funding group, just, say something SWGM PD or SWGMD on the comments. Let us know that you heard. Let them know. Let Chris know you heard it here.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, just say, hey, I heard about it on the on the podcast. So yeah, next is stretch goals. We've got 32 days to go, so we're gonna fund and on to stretch goals.
That's so awesome.
So, and then a lot of the hard work. We've been doing a lot of hard work on it, but now that we're funding, a lot of hard work is even going to be going into it more to really flesh it out.
I want to write the first review, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-submit it now. It was great. I loved it. It was better than Cats. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to play it again and again.
Yep, I want to play it again and again and again.
So when it funds, are we doing an actual play here on the channel with Chris running it? Since Chris has not run any of the actual plays on the channel.
Yeah, we might have to do that. I start a new job on Monday, so it's all going to depend on what happens with the new job and what my hours are.
Don't sweat it, Chris. I'll set you up with my Savage Worlds GM tokens and everything in Roll20.
Sweet.
Give you access as a GM, and you can just run that shit.
All right. We'll figure out the time.
All right. I'm in. I want to play a scurvy bald pirate.
You can do that.
Awesome. All right.
I want to play a ninja.
A ninja? No, you can't.
We don't
play a
have
ninja.
ninjas. We don't have ninjas in the system.
Wait. Can I play an assassin?
Oh, you can play. What's that goddamn game that the guy Assassin's Creed? Yeah, you can make one of those dudes in the pirate. Sure.
Can I play a cybernetic organism from the future?
No. I'm gonna say no.
Hey, we taught him something.
Awesome. So I think that brings this show to a conclusion. That's Combat Basics. If there's anything we missed, feel free to comment on the YouTube channel. We do view those comments. We do reply to them for the YouTube videos over at Savage or SWGM podcast on the YouTube channel. So until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Chris, Dave, and Jib saying keep rolling and stay savage.